It's just a huge honor for me to be podcast interviewing Ragini Singla and her husband Moki Goyal, all the way from Brooklyn, New York. I think Brooklyn, I think it's so funny. When you grow up in Kansas, you hear New York City, and then you find out that nobody lives in New York City. They say, you live in New York City? No, I live in Brooklyn. I live in Manhattan. I live in Queens. I'm like, well, where's this New York City thing at? And it doesn't really exist, does it?
It exists.
Yeah, it's like I live in Ahwatukee, but if you're a lawyer, you say I live in Phoenix. I mean, the lawyers say this is Phoenix, Arizona. But if you even say to some person in Ahwatukee, well, do you live in Phoenix? They go, no, I live in Ahwatukee. And it's like, okay, well, that is Phoenix. So
Chicago is very similar that way.
Is that right? So
yeah.
Ragini graduated from Temple Dental School in 2009 and completed a general practice residency at Sacred Heart Hospital. That had to be Catholic, was it?
It was Catholic.
Oh, I know. My two oldest sisters are nuns, so if anything with Sacred Heart, Bleeding Heart, it's always a Catholic deal. She owns FlossNYC, a boutique dental practice on Central Park South in Manhattan. She always knew she wanted to own her own dental practice, but found that the road to ownership wasn't easy. She and her husband, Moki Goyal, started FlossNYC Practice Blueprint, and that's the website, FlossNYC Practice Blueprint.com, to break down the convoluted process for other aspiring owners. Moki has over 20 years experience in the tech space. He started his career in consulting, helping Fortune 500 companies implement enterprise software. He has extensive entrepreneurial experience building businesses, utilizing web and video production and online education. Currently, he is Vice President of Product Development of Edulence, hosting the online training for companies such as Lincoln Financial, AARP, and Merrill Lynch. He's also Chief Operations of FlossNYC and Practice Blueprint. Ragini, I want to start with you. I'm always leery of information coming from really old dentist guys. And they're always saying that all the girls in dental school never want to own their own practice because they want to be soccer moms, and they want to be able to leave at 5, forget about the whole business, and go pick up their kids and take them to volleyball and soccer and all this. Is that true, or is that not true, or is it 50 Shades of Gray?
I think the great thing about being a practice owner is you can be a soccer mom and a practice owner. Why do you have to pick? I don't like soccer, but if you want to be a soccer mom, you can. And if you want to leave at 5 o'clock, you can. So you can do all of it.
But when you were in class, and you graduated in 2009, and since I took algebra, I could figure out that was about 8 years ago. 8 years ago in your class, what % of the girls in your class wanted to own their own office someday? And what was it for the boys? I mean, what were they? Was it the same, different?
I would say that we had a pretty ambitious group of girls. So a lot of them wanted their own practices. A lot of the boys had fathers who were in dentistry. So, they kind of were going to join their dad or join the family practice. I didn't have anybody in my family that was a dentist, so I always knew I had to kind of pave the way for myself. But I think we had a pretty entrepreneurial group in school.
Yeah, but I think it's that way in all the schools. I mean, who gets to the level of doctorate in dentistry, law, or medicine and just wants to go be an employee? I mean, I'm not seeing that in dentistry.
Yeah, I think that we see both sides of the coin. So in school, I think we had a lot of ambitious people around us, and we all, when you're in school, you kind of are like, I'm going to get out and conquer the world. And then you get out and you're like, whoa, I didn't realize this is the world. So, I got out and worked in Philadelphia for a while, and then I moved to New York. And, I think it's true that they say something like, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. But it wasn't easy to make it here.
Okay, now when you say New York, you mean Manhattan, right?
Manhattan.
So, and where was your dental school?
My dental school was in Temple, Northeast Philadelphia.
So you went to dental school in Philly, and now you practice in Manhattan. Which one is the cooler town?
Ooh, I don't want to alienate anybody. I would say that Philadelphia has amazing restaurants, and New York City has some really amazing
I think it has amazing everything.
Amazing everything.
You know, the culture is really great and all that stuff, but Philly has the best, not like in terms of like per capita, the number of restaurants that are just out of this world. And we're big food people, so.
Philadelphia.
I
And if you
remember-
want steak, it's the place to go.
I remember the first time, I'll never forget it my entire life. I think I was 27. Me and my dental school buddy, Craig Steichen, went to New York City. And, you know, I was from Kansas, where the tallest thing is a barn or a wheat silo. And I will never forget flying down, and I'm looking out the window, and all of a sudden it dawned on me that that thing over there was Manhattan. And I mean, I can still remember like it was an hour ago, thinking, "Holy shit, what is that?" I mean, I think Manhattan has got to be the coolest town in the world. And I also think the coolest statistic in the world is that if all Earthlings lived at the same density of Manhattan, we could all live on New Zealand.
That was impressive, yeah.
Isn't that impressive? So let me cut to the chase. I called you to be on my show. You didn't call me. Whether you're an associate in private practice, working for one guy in one office, or working for a corporate where they might own 1,000 locations, associate turnover is a plague. I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'm 54. Whenever you have dinner with a 54-year-old dentist, have you ever had an associate? By the time you're 54, they go, "Yeah, I've had half a dozen," and I mean, and they think, like, I call it a success and a victory when they stayed with me for like 7 years. But if I've owned my dental office 30 years, I mean, 7 years is like a marathon. But most of them want to do like a 5K or a 10K or a half marathon. So I see no evidence. Some of the biggest corporate chains out there, their average dentist doesn't even stay with them for 1 year. It doesn't even make 12 months. But when you talk to those associates, they're scared. They're scared. If they go to FlossNYC Practice Blueprint.com, can you help them alleviate their fears to go into practice ownership?
We definitely try to. So, you know, I think that part of the reason that we started it was because we were terrified. So when we started the process, we had no idea what we were doing. And like all of the associates that come to Practice Blueprint, we were really at a loss of what to do, and we were really scared of making a mistake. And, you know, dentists as a whole are very meticulous people, and we don't like making mistakes. We like to be right all the time. And so it's hard to jump into a journey that has a lot of unknowns.
You know,
Yeah,
I can say I've been a dentist for 30 years, and I have never once in my life been raw. In fact, I can't even say the word because I've never been raw. But so for starting, what is Practice Blueprint?
Well, if you want to just sum it up very quickly, it's basically an online course that teaches people, dental associates, how to get from where they are today to being a practice owner. There's so many unknowns, and you know, it starts with, you know, what are the differences between being an associate and being an owner, and then how to build your team, how to start your company, and then really like how to get started right away. That's what Practice Blueprint is all about.
It's basically what I wish we had had when we started this journey. So it would have been so amazing to have a map of where we were going and what to do, because I think when you start the process, like I said, we really didn't know anything, and you start talking to brokers. That's probably the first step of something you do. And I remember my first experience with a broker. We were really excited about finding a listing, and I thought it was just the best sounding practice because they make every practice sound like the best sounding practice. And I called the broker, and she hit me with a million questions, and it was like she was speaking another language. She was like, "Are you pre-qualified? You know, how much do you produce per year? How much do you want to spend?" And I had zero clue what I was talking about. And I felt like I went to a boxing match with a heavyweight champion, and I had never boxed in my life, and she totally knocked me out. And, you know, it was a really humbling experience, to say the least, and, you know, kind of had to pick myself back up and get back out there. So I furiously searched Dentaltown for every answer to all of those questions. And then
Nice.
I was like, okay.
Nice.
I mean, you feel so stupid, you know? You walk in there, you're like ready to do this. You're like, yeah, we're going to do this. And then you go in there and, you know, they don't even want to talk to you because you don't know what you're talking about. And so then we actually did use Dentaltown quite a bit, where we like asked a lot of questions. We like did lots of searches, try to figure out what's going on. And, you know, there's tons of information on there, and you can really learn a lot. And so we started putting our notes together, and we realized maybe this could be a product.
And the difference between Dentaltown and Facebook is Dentaltown, you can go search these conversations that are focused. I mean, there's 50 categories. Like if I broke off a mesial, of an endodontic file in the mesial buccal root of number 3, and I went to the top 10 most famous endodontists on Facebook, I mean, what would I do? Scroll back for 40 years and 40 nights trying to find it, you know? So I like the way, I'll still always like the website approach the most because it's organized, so that when we have these long conversations, they're organized and they're still there. So 2 years later, some kid in dental school comes along and wants to read that. There's a lot of that stuff is just timeless information. But, you know, it's funny. I had the same problem when I bought my first house. I saw this house. I called a broker, and he met me on the driveway, and he showed me the house. And he was saying, well, it'd be like 200 basis points over prime and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't know a flipping thing he said. And I remember going home thinking, man, I'm really dumb. So I signed up for the Scottsdale School of Real Estate. And it was Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 6 to 10 for 6 weeks. And literally got my real estate degree and diploma. And I was so glad I did because I didn't know any of that stuff. So you designed FlossNYC Practice Blueprint so they can learn their whole real estate's license or all the knowledge about what it's going to be like to go and go from being an employee to being rich.
It was basically because, you know, after taking so many notes, we felt like, you know, we don't want anybody to be as dumb as we were. So we felt like we made so many mistakes. And honestly, I think got really lucky. Looking back, there were so many moments where things could have really taken a turn and could have really messed up. But we somehow got lucky and ended up on the other side. And, you know, now we know what those things were. But at the time, ignorance really was bliss, and we had no clue what we were getting into. But as we started to take these notes, we realized, you know, that it was such a great resource, and we were helping people around us, and started to realize we had something that was productive and helpful.
The scary part, I feel, is that like when you don't know what you're doing and there's no, you know, you're walking into like a dark room, if you're uncertain, it leads to inaction. And I think that's the hardest part. And I think that's what a lot of associates have, because we've talked to a lot of them, and many of them are like, well, I make enough money. And I think I even watched a video with you. I forgot who you were interviewing, but you were talking about the differences between associateship and being a practice owner. And it's huge. You know, it's like, you know, the gears are higher. You have a multiplier effect of having other people working underneath you. Everything changes, not only from a financial perspective, but autonomy, scheduling, like all sorts of things. It really changes the way you live your life. And I think, you know, it sounds a little hokey when you say it like that, but I think the reality is how do you want to live your life? Do you want to be in control of it, or do you want to work for someone else and have someone else dictate, you know, how you work and when you work?
I really like that that video you had on your website. In fact, I'm texting or emailing that to Zach. I think we should put it on the end of the podcast. We tape on that YouTube. That way, if they're watching us on YouTube, they can see it. Do you want to do that?
Sure, that'd be great.
Does that sound good? So she's driving to work right now. She's 25. She's working for some old guy, some 65-year-old guy's associate. The guy's driving her insane. When she got a job there, he said that he wants to get to know her and work with her because he's thinking about retiring next year when he's 65. Heads up, kids. For every dentist there's about 100 dentists who says, yeah, I'm going to retire in a year or two. And then when a year or two comes, it never happens. I mean, and I'll put that in perspective. Going back through your entire life, when have you ever said to yourself, you know, I never need a paycheck again? I can't think. I don't want a new car, new house. I don't want to go on a vacation. They're just, I'm good. I'm good. Got enough in bank account. Never want to practice again. I mean, when someone tells you come work for them and they're going to sell you a practice here, number one, it won't happen. And if it does happen, you're going to get screwed because the office was doing 500,000. You come in all hot with all this energy and you're only 25 and you spend 3 years building this practice up to $1 million. Now guess how much the practice cost?
Yeah. You just increased the price of the practice.
Yeah, you just, all that work you did, now you got to go buy it on interest over 15 years. So, I mean, and this happens with the big boys too, where they start doing M&A activity, but they never hammered out the details. And then a year later, as this deal's going through, and they think that you guys are going to agree on these valuation numbers or the multiple or EBITDA. And I mean, even the big boys make this mistake. But if this guy's really going to sell it to you, then you need to get a gosh darn practice evaluation, or you got to get a purchasing price nailed down now. Don't work there and double it and triple it and then have to pay for it. But where do you see, where do your modules help them out? I mean, do you think they don't know the economic language? Do you think they don't have their emotional satisfaction equals perception minus expectation? Do you think it's because some kids, I could always separate the dental school class in two kids. If your mom and dad owned a restaurant, a farm, a business, you are in a totally different mindset than if your mom and dad were employees. I mean, if your mom worked at the post office and your dad worked at the Department of Motor Vehicles, you have totally different expectations and realities than if your dad owned a wheat farm or a dairy farm. And then the biggest variable, I still always believe, is geographic. I mean, like you started off the podcast saying that if you can make it in Manhattan, you can make it anywhere. So what of those four areas, or what areas is FlossNYC Practice Blueprint.com education modules? What areas are they focusing on?
The first thing we do is we introduce you to what are the differences between ownership and being an associate, and then we walk you through the process. And then the main thing is like, how do you get the expertise that you need? Because like you said about the economics and stuff, yeah, I think that's definitely one aspect of it. But as you probably agree, I think you probably agree with this, is that like nobody does it alone. You always have a team of people that help you, whether it's running the practice itself or when you purchase the practice. And one of the things that we found, and we say this in the course over and over and over again, is get a solid team. That's an accountant, a broker, a lawyer, and people who are going to stand behind you and like help you make the decisions that you won't necessarily know what the right answer to is. And I think like
an accountant, a broker, who else?
A business attorney to help you set up the company, but then also negotiate the lease, also just the practice, that they kind of help with the valuation as well, and they can help you negotiate. They can be the strong arm if you're not necessarily that personality.
And I think the important thing is that these experts need to have dental specific knowledge. So when we first started, we thought, well, we could just call up our family attorney, a friend down the street, and have him take a look at the contract. And he was the first one to say, listen, you need somebody who does dentistry. Let me send you somewhere. But not every attorney would say that. So, we realize there are a lot of things that are specific in a dental transaction that you need to have experts who understand those little specifics. So, for example, if you're taking on a practice and this guy's saying he's going to retire and then he's going to work for 10 years, you want somebody to say, okay, when are you retiring? When are you going to leave? How long is that time period? And commit it to paper. Or while you're working, if you do a crown and then I seat it, how are we going to negotiate the pay for that? So these are things that your family attorney is not going to know.
And if you're selling the practice, and I sell my practice to you, and then you go back in there and say that every crown I did in the last 5 years had an open margin and you had to replace it and then bill the dentist. I mean, these things, the specifics are, it's everything. And these dentists are I don't know what they're thinking on Dentaltown. They'll send them a 40-page PPO contract. They just sign it. They don't read it. And then on Dentaltown, you see all these threads where if you sign this PPO, they can automatically enroll you into the state's Medicaid program. And then if you're enrolled in the state's Medicaid program, they need a 12-month certified letter for you to opt out of it, but they can still send you patients for a year. I mean, and then they're always the victim on Dentaltown. They're always the victim. I'm like, okay, so you're a doctor, you signed a legal contract, signed it and dated it, and how are you the victim now? I mean, you agreed to a contract. I mean, you didn't sell your kidney on eBay. This is a legal contract, which is enforceable in the court of law. Why do they not? They sign leases on their. They'll go rent a space for 10 years, and they'll just sign the lease.
And to be fair, that's not their expertise, but they're definitely not victims. And I think the biggest lesson is like, know where your knowledge limits are. And like, I remember when you were working at a group practice in Manhattan, keep in mind in Manhattan, right? The density of Manhattan. And there was like almost a 2 square mile radius of a non-compete agreement. 2 square miles in Manhattan is almost the entire width of the island.
So they had everybody, all of a sudden, after 8 months of working, they have everybody sign a contract, and everybody else signs it and hands it over, and I'm the crazy one who's like, why? I cannot sign this. This is half of the island, from Fifth Avenue to the Hudson and 28th Street to 59th Street, which would have ended up excluding the practice that I ultimately bought. So like you said, it's so important to read every contract that's in front of you, but a lot of times it can be muddled in legalese, and you need somebody who's going to translate that to you and say what it really means.
And I also want to say something about those non-compete clauses. Whenever you talk to attorneys, when it goes to court, a judge can't change the contract. She can only enforce it or throw it out. So a lot of times a dentist will say, well, you can't, when you leave, you can't take any of my patients. And then it turns out that, they come in with evidence that you sent patients these letters saying that you've moved and whatever. And then they go to the judge, and the judge say, okay, well, the contract said she can't do it, and she did it. I'm reading the contract now. What? It doesn't say, do I spank her, beat her, take her car away? Is it $1? But if you said, if she does it, if I prove she's doing this at all, she'll write me a check for $50,000. And the judge say, yeah, okay, that's all legal. You all signed it, so write him a check for $50,000. And same thing on those covenant not to competes. So if that covenant compete was half the island, I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean, I've been around the block 54 times. I bet you most of those judges would throw it out. So
I'm sure, but it would just be one more thing that you would have to deal with.
Right. And a lot of people in dentistry are unemployed because they worked for one dental company and they signed a restricted covenant where they can't work in that industry for 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years. But every time that goes to court and you just prove hardship, you say, yeah, that's all I know. I've only done this for 20 years. I got a family. I got a house payment. And then they look at this big old $1 million, $1 billion company and poor Henry who can't find a job, and they always throw it out. I mean, so a lot of that stuff is just. So I want to ask you a more specific question. Do you think these young kids should buy a practice or do a de novo startup from scratch?
We really believe in buying a practice. I think the reason is because you have income on day one. So you're buying an income generating asset, which is not, which is rare, to be able to be in an industry where you can instantly buy yourself something that's going to create money for the rest of your career. And, you're going to pay a little bit more for it, but, I see every day, not to say that starting from scratch is bad, we think it's great also if that's the route you want to take, but I see a lot of dentists in Manhattan who start out by renting a chair, for example, and they slowly build their patient pool. And, they're open one day, and it can take years to get to a place where you have a full schedule. So there's an opportunity cost, I think, in starting that way.
It also depends on your situation, I think, because certainly in, Manhattan is a very unique situation. If you're in other parts of the country where there's, where it's more rural or, just less dense, it may be more cost effective to start from scratch. But you are going to start from zero. So you're not going to be busy at first. And if you can afford it, maybe that's the way to do it. If you want to brand it and really kind of have your own thing, it's an awesome way to do it. The one downside is that when I think of like buying something, you're buying, our accountant, I remember he always said this, he's like, you're buying cash flow. And if you're buying cash flow, don't overpay. And when you're looking to start from scratch, oftentimes, you might buy some property or whatever it might be, and you have zero cash flow. And I also know that from a financing perspective, a lot of banks will give very, very, very generous loans in terms of like low interest or 100% financing, things like that. Especially if it's a good practice that's generating income.
My dad is a doctor, and he started off by talking to some colleagues about where to work, and he found out there was this tiny little town in Pennsylvania, and they're like, we don't have an oncologist for literally miles and miles and miles. And they're begging people to come here. So he started from scratch, and he was great. Day one, everybody would come see him. So if you're in that kind of situation, I think it's an amazing way to start. And in dental school, I thought, I'm going to go back to my hometown and I'll start a practice and it'll be great. I'm going to do exactly what my dad did. But life takes different turns. I moved to New York for this guy and, had to.
Oh my God. Yeah, I was going to say, your dad did everything right. I moved 1,000 miles away from home because Wichita, Kansas, where I was born and raised, had the same population of 300,000 for like 20 years, because every time a girl gets pregnant, a guy leaves town. And then there's University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Creighton, where every year they're throwing 30 more dentists on this town of 300,000 with no growth. So I was looking for the growth center, so I went to Phoenix, 1,000 miles away for a high growth area. Your dad did the genius thing. Go rural. And you started this conversation with, if you can make it in Manhattan, you can make it anywhere. How brutal was it starting in the most crowded? I mean, how many dental schools are in New York City?
Oh my gosh, double digits. I think when we first started, when we initially looked at this practice, we loved it. But we walked into this building and literally it's right down the street from the Plaza Hotel. So you're across from Central Park, you're around the corner from the Plaza. You walk into this building and there's no signage, so no one knows that you're in there practicing. And the entire building is 14 floors, and each floor has 4 dentists. And then we just looked around like, how are we going to survive in this building? There's so much saturation here. But, it turns out that for every dentist that there was in that building, there's a million other people in this little city. So, it works out somehow. But I agree. I think, it's a tough road.
New York City is unique that way, where, they have these medical office buildings that are just loaded up with all sorts of medical professionals and dental professionals. And it works because they don't need retail space that, on the street level or anything like that. They find them through the internet. I mean, that's the only way this works, is because, there's the internet and there's lots of ways to find people for insurance, lookups, things like that.
And, I've never seen a patient walk into the building and knock on every door and figure out what dentist they want to go to.
Yeah.
Everybody walks in and they know what floor they're going to and what office they're going to.
So in real estate, it's location. But you're saying even though you're in a 14-story building with 4 dentists on every floor, your location has gone from the physical building to the Internet of Things, right? The Internet. So are you guys, would you say a lot of your successes have been because you've been very good Internet marketers?
I think we've been decent, and we're definitely not the best. We've seen some sites that are really great, and we kind of like try to emulate that. But I think what we have done well is that we started with a pretty good Facebook presence, and we spent a lot of time and effort to really kind of put a lot of posts out there, get a lot of followers. We also spent some money on our website to really make it look really nice. We, employed video. I'm in tech, so I have access to a lot of that stuff. I shoot video. So what we wanted to do was establish a presence. And then I think it slowly started to build. So I think we spent a lot of time in the beginning.
I think also what helped a lot was having those patients kind of take you on as their own doctor. So it's like that handoff between the doctor who's leaving and the doctor who's taking over. And then as those patients started to accept me, I took over from an older doctor, male doctor, and then this like small, petite little Indian girls coming in. They're kind of like, when did you graduate? And how old are you? And, as they started to accept me, they would tell their friends and say like, you should try her. She's good. It'll be okay. So word of mouth helps a lot too.
The thing that the women dentists have the biggest advantage because, one of the data that I'm just obsessed with, and I've read so many articles on it, the United States has more economists that have won the Nobel Prize in economics than any other country, Most of them come from the University of Chicago. In fact, if you ever go to the University of Chicago and you go to the Department of Economics, and you walk down those big hallways, between every window is this big portrait of somebody that graduated from there that had got a Nobel Prize in economics. I mean, and the hallway is forever. Have you ever walked down it?
Yeah.
I mean, just some of the biggest legends in economic history. But they keep saying the same thing, that when I sell you a bottled water and a big pen, you know what it is. You know this is a bottled water. So when I say the price, if I said it was $1 or 89 cents, you'd decide. If I said it was $49, you'd say, well, I'm not paying $49 for a bottle of water. So, but in dentistry, when a doctor walks in and says, when someone walks in and says, you need a new transmission, well, you don't know if that's true. And when you get your oil change, if you say, well, we really need to change your transmission fluid, I don't know if that's true. And when someone says, I can't fix your air conditioner, you need to hold. And so now some doctor walks in and says, you have 4 cavities and they're $250 each for a filling, and you need to give me $1,000. You're just like, man, I just came in to get my teeth cleaned. And they and when you're in a no trust situation, they're believing women 3 to 1. When a man's telling them with a tie on, you think you're selling me something. When a little Indian petite girl with a big old beautiful smile says it, they're like, damn, I know I should have flossed. So there's so much more when they're so much more believable. And if I was a woman dentist and I was on the internet, and so what are the 2 things they're afraid of? Fear. Well, who are you afraid of the most? That old man that you worked for, or a little petite Indian girl? I mean, I imagine you would hurt me or my child less than a man. And then they're afraid of cost, and the biggest fear of the cost is I don't want to pay something if I don't need it. So I tell every woman dentist I know their whole website should be, if I was a woman dentist, all my associates be women, the whole branding be women. We won't hurt you, a place you can trust. Just be this. I just go on fear and trust. That'd be my whole branding, fear and trust. And I'll tell you what, I had one of the saddest conversations in the world, and I was talking to an MD in Phoenix. I said, "Come on, I'm a 54-year-old fat guy." I said, "Don't you think maybe I should go to a cardiologist and get worked up? I mean, what if I got some blockage or something that needs a stent or something?" And he's sitting there thinking, I don't know even where I could send you where they just wouldn't automatically want the $100,000 and go in there and do a bypass or shoving in stents or whatever. And then I immediately started thinking, yeah, men. And you know what I like the most about women dentists is when there's no money in the profession, like in the United States with teaching, it's all women. And then when I travel around the world, when I go to countries where there's no money, all the dentists are women. And then when I go to rich countries, all the dentists are men. Men always show up where there's money. Women show up when they have a profession and there's a job to be done. And I'll never forget the one woman dentist who made me cry in Nepal. I'll never forget it. And I was in Kathmandu, Nepal. And I was talking to her, and I seen her office and everything. And I said, so in US dollars, like how much money do you make a month? And she goes, oh, I'm so lucky. My husband has a really good job in the government, and my dental office has lost $50 US every month for 10 years. And $50 in Kathmandu, that's a shitload of money. And I'm like, well, why do you work 6 days a week to lose $1,000? A $50 bill every month. She goes, well, who else is going to do it? That's a woman mindset. I just love women. I just really do. I mean, they seem to always do things for the right reason.
I think it's the calling, and I think also, oddly enough, in New York City, being ethical and being honest is kind of a niche market. So we have so many patients.
That's what I was saying. Yeah.
So if you do the right thing in New York City, people flock to you. We'll see patients where they'll go to another dentist around the corner, and it's probably just this one same guy, I don't know, but they'll say, oh, he told me I had 17 cavities, so I just wanted a second opinion. I feel like maybe I have 13, but not 17. And then I'll take a look and say, maybe you have 2 if I look really closely. And so, it's kind of like an alley-oop, it's like they're passing me the ball and you just tell the truth, and then the patient automatically believes you, they trust you, and you feel great because you're doing the right thing. And there's so much work to go around. You don't have to be worried about it. There's plenty for everyone.
So you have a mindset of hope and growth and abundancy. You don't live in fear and scarcity. I mean, it's coming through on every comment you make. That you don't think in fear and scarcity. And believe it or not, that New York City, you say it's with ethics is a new thing. Well, I don't care what city you go to. When grandma's air conditioner doesn't come on and she calls the air conditioner guy on TV and comes out, she knows her cousin Eddie would fix it with duct tape and WD-40. And that man is standing there with a tie saying, it's really old. You need a whole new unit. It's going to be $8,000 installed. There's no trust in any country around the world. Everybody, I've lectured in 50 countries. Everybody thinks they're getting sold unless it's transparent and visible. So whenever you go to the invisible, cars, autos, transmit, things you don't understand, then they're summing you up for trust. And if you can convey trust, once you can fake trust and ethics, you got it made.
And that's actually why, like in the course,
that was a joke. I said once you could fake trust and
I
ethics.
know. I was thinking, it's Howard.
And I'll give you some more research on that. One of the reasons I won't wear a tie, and I call it Dentistry Uncensored, is because the research is clear. They never believe the politicians. They never believe the CEOs. And then Willie Nelson, they always say, well, why do they listen to a movie star? They listen to a movie star because they believe him. When you're Willie Nelson and you admit you're stoned and you haven't had a bath in a week and you haven't paid your taxes, why would that guy be lying?
Yeah, right, exactly.
Why would he tell? And when they cuss, the same thing with cussing. It's very established in research that, well, if you're politically correct, then you're trying to say all these right things, and now I don't trust you. But if you're cussing and you're transparent with your flaws or what went wrong, you're just more believable. Because those people clearly don't care what you think enough to have to lie to you.
I think it's being authentic, whatever that means for you. If that's like cursing or, telling somebody that you were late in the morning because you missed your train or
saying that, you made a lot of mistakes in your life and just and here's what we learned and we want to share it with you. Yeah. I think that's the part that people really value.
Yeah, well, don't bring up my mistakes because Ryan's sitting right next to me. I don't want to talk about. I was only supposed to have 2 kids, and then we had 4. And but anyway, no, Ryan, you weren't a mistake. You were an accident.
Never was Ryan.
It's slightly different. So how are you marketing yourself? How are you getting this information out? And who is your target market? Are they still in dental school, or have they been working as an associate for a year or 2?
I think generally we look for associates who are already working. Because one of the things we find is that dental students aren't even worried about 5 years out. They just want to get working and they're scared. They're nervous about having control of their own patients. But I think the target market is definitely the dental associates. But then also the way we target them is a lot of it through Facebook ads and just online ads. And that's where a majority of the people of that age range are, 25 to 60. Anyone who's interested in looking for a practice.
We've also been going to a lot of residency programs because I think that's the sweet spot for new dentists is you've graduated school, so maybe you've done 3 crowns, and then you're in residency, so you're kind of thinking about a job. So thinking about owning your own practice is a little bit more organic for them. I remember being in school and having practice management courses, and I would just take the folder home and throw it somewhere, I'll deal with that in 10 years. So it's really early, I think. And
our cousin actually, she just graduated. And so she's doing a residency now. And we always talk to her about, practice management and how do I get into it. And it is overwhelming for her. And I think that's why you have to do it in small chunks.
What kind of doctor is she?
She's a dentist.
She's a dentist.
That's another thing you see all around the world that if you're born in Ghana and your grandfather was a goat farmer, well, then your dad went into that and you go into that. If you're born with these, it's so cultural. Names come from that. And when you go to any dental school in India, Asia, Africa, anywhere, a third of the class has a dentist in the family. And some of those, I had dinner in a dentist home in New Delhi who had 35 dentists in the family, and half of them were living in that house. And the other one was Christian Coachman's family in Sao Paulo, Brazil. 35 dentists in that family. So,
Wow.
so dentists, the everybody talks about the Fortune 500. Everybody wants to talk about Honda, and Nissan, and Toyota, but it's still the planet runs on the backs of these small family businesses, which do 80% of all the heavy lifting. I think a great way to market this is write an article on Dentaltown.
That's actually what we do. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that I called you, you didn't call me. I thought this podcast would be great marketing for you. And the other thing that's neat on Dentaltown, in fact, you should say it in your article that when you write an article, you should finish it with when you look at these articles online on Dentaltown, everybody your age reads it on the iPhones. Only old farts like me read it on a PC. You probably think I'm so old I'm reading it on a mainframe, right, from IBM. If you go to the magazine, when you open up an article, it's got the social media share button. So, you know, they have shows like Facebook, Twitter, Google+, LinkedIn, YouTube, Pinterest. You guys are probably would add Snapchat or I don't know what all you're on. But the bottom line, if you say, hey, if do me a favor, go up that article and share that on your social media, because one dental student is a friend of another dental student. They're all running in the same circle. So in that article, if you asked them after they read it to go up and share it to their social media groups, all it is one click, one button. And that you write an article on Dentaltown and you asked them to share it on their social media, you'd crush them all. And the other thing we have is once a year, we have a special edition magazine. So we have Dentaltown magazine goes out every month, and Orthotown magazine to the orthodontists. But once a year, we have that new grad issue. And we just try to do articles for the new graduate, and they love it. And it's one of the most read issues we do each year. And the editor is Sam at ferranmedia.com. But yeah, you should do an article in the new grad issue, and you should do an article on for Dentaltown magazine. For that, it's Tom at ferranmedia.com. It's Dr. Tom Giacobbe. He's been the editor for 17 years, but Tom at ferranmedia.com, because I just know this. The turnover's high, whether they're, and this is no dig on corporate, because all the people saying, oh, the turnover's so high in corporate. Dude, the turnover's just as high in private practice. It's the same. It's kind of like when they say, oh, well, Putin used to work for the KGB. Well, George Bush 41 was the director of the CIA. What's the difference between the CIA and the KGB? Probably the CIA is more efficient at breaking all the laws. But the bottom line is, where was I going with that? I got sidetracked on
corporate dentistry.
You're talking about corporate.
Yeah, corporate. Nobody's keeping their associate. And I got to tell you something. 30 years ago, they were telling all the girls in our class that they wouldn't be lasting long. They'd all meet some guy like Moki, and he'd have a good job, and they'd stay home and make babies, and they'd just be cooking and not doing dentistry. Turned out 30 years later, that was all baloney. Every one of them girls practiced to the end, and they were figuring demographically that those girls were only going to have like 40% of the length of the career, and since they were girls, they'd only do like 70% of the production. So when you accept 3 women into dental school, it's the equivalent of just like one guy. Those girls from UMKC class of 87, their average dental office was bigger and collected more money than the average boys. And plus, I don't know of any of the girls who lost their practice, went to the Betty Ford Center, but I could name a few of my my homies. But they won out, and I see you. They living in fear, and that's why I had you to come on the show. Anything to help them. It kind of looks like they're walking around the swimming pool, just dipping their toe in the water. Then they go work another 6 months. They keep dipping their toe. Whereas I graduated May 11, had my office open September 21st. I mean, I just walked out of school and dove in the deep end. Figured I'm going to learn how to swim. I doubt I'll drown. I mean, there's only there's only a 0.4% failure rate when the big banks finance you to buy a new practice. So only 1 in 200 goes under, and that's always because they had their license taken away, and they always get their license taken away for drugs and alcohol. That's why when I opened up my practice, true story, Ryan, I told my drug dealer not to call me for a year. I said, I'm going to get clean and sober just for 1 year. No. Call me
And
in
look
1
at
year. But so if you don't have a problem with substance abuse, you just need to go do it. So why do you think they're living in fear, and what is FlossNYC Practice Blueprint going to do to help eliminate their fear? That knowledge is power.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think knowledge is power, but I think, when you're doing something that you've never done before, there's obviously going to be fear and uncertainty. But all we're doing, like we were saying, Dentaltown has all of the information on there. All we've done is kind of consolidated into a easy to digest formula and said, okay, well, follow these steps, and these will take you most of the way. Of course, you're going to encounter your own challenges. You're going to encounter problems that we can't possibly predict, but those are your challenges. All we're going to do is say, here are the big steps, here are the big goalposts you need to get by, and then you'll be able to take it the rest of the way.
I think what happens is that there are very specific things that you need to do to buy a practice. So regardless of your perspective or your city or what's going on in your particular situation, which we also address by doing kind of consulting one-on-one as well. When clients need that, we do offer it. But there are very specific things that you can do to make sure that you have done your due diligence, that you're not getting caught in a red flag, and you're getting a great practice that's going to generate income for you for the entirety of your career. So we write those action items out for you and give you the steps to do those things one step at a time. Mm-hmm. So it's not overwhelming.
I like two of the features on your website at FlossNYCPracticeBlueprint.com. One is estimate my income. And then the other one was see if you're ready and take the assessment and get my free ownership guide.
The ownership guide we've been putting together for the past probably 2 years. We've been putting it together, and we kept on adding to it. Concepts like lifetime income and things like that to really explain, because if you're not even thinking about practice ownership, you haven't thought about the ideas of, building wealth, lifetime income, the differences between, being an owner and being an associate. And so the assessment actually kind of rates you in another field.
I just wish you would add one thing to your website about that lifetime income. Is that, again, I beat this into the heads every time I lecture dental school. The women dentists in the class, they always marry a man with a career and a good job. And the male dentists in the class always marry something that looked hot in a pair of blue jeans and worked at Taco Bell. And then as soon as they get married, she's like, oh, I married a rich dentist, so I don't have to work at the Waffle House anymore. And I'm married to a rich dentist, and then she destroys $10,000 a month for 40 years. How much does it cost when you marry a stay-home mom that spends $10,000 a month until you're 65? That, I mean, you made a good decision to be a dentist, and then the women dentists always say, well, if I'm going to put up with a man's bullshit, he better have a job. and then a man says, well, if she looks hot, I don't care what she does, I'm going to marry something that looks hot. And she is hot for about a year. And then you realize you made a seriously wrong mistake. So you do need to actually educate them that here's the difference in lifetime income between marrying a woman with a job versus without a job. I mean, agree or disagree?
I think like everyone has like a different philosophy on that, but I think it's all about what you want to do. People have lots of different passions in their lives, and I think you have to go and follow that. But it's all about what you want out of your life.
Well, I want to go back to your class. 2009. How many of the women in your class married a man with a career? What percent of them?
I would say 70%.
Just 70?
Yeah.
And what the other 30% marry?
Everyone had a job, so none of their husbands are staying home.
Okay. But 70% had a good career, and 30% just had an average job?
Well, so a lot of them were in school. I would say a lot of the other percentage were in school.
And what percent of the men married a financial disaster?
Well, I don't know if they were financial disasters, but there were a lot of stay-at-home moms, which I think is great. But I don't know what they were spending. They were spending $10,000 a month. Not sure.
Yeah.
We weren't that.
And there's an opportunity cost. So when you say kids cost money, you got to educate them that a stay-at-home mom So, you got identical twin brothers. One marries a stay-at-home mom and has 2 kids. One marries a professional woman who has 2 kids. I mean, the difference of that from age 25 to 65, it's an enormous amount of money.
It is, and it's honestly a decision that they have to make.
Well,
But there is opportunity cost no matter how you look
And then
at
I
it.
want to ask you another question. This is Dentistry Uncensored. What if a woman in the class graduated, say, $350,000 in debt, and she married a man in the class? He was $350,000 in debt, so they're like $700,000 in debt. At what point would you just leave the country and say, "Screw it, we're going to Sydney, London, Paris," and just say, "Okay, we can never come back to the United States"? I mean, this would be good advice, wouldn't it? I mean, at what point? I mean, there's got to be some limit where you say, "Okay, I'm leaving this country and I'm going to go move to Auckland, New Zealand."
I think it's about 30 days before the creditors start hitting you.
I don't think
you have.
but could they find you in Auckland, New Zealand?
No. But I'm saying, like, you have to leave the country within 30 days.
I also think, it's funny because when you're talking about the stay-at-home mom, my mom was a stay-at-home mom,
So
but and my dad was a doctor. And so, she always says that his job was to make the money and her job was to save it. And so, you might be,
Nice.
She was not the stay-at-home mom who's spending $10,000 a month. In fact, if my dad was saying, "Let's spend on a vacation," she would say, "No, we're not going anywhere. Go back to work and then come back the next day and go back again." So, we grew up that way that, you don't keep spending what you're earning, So I think that's part of our philosophy now. It's like, we have an income generating asset. We don't want to negate it by spending all the income.
But that's where, whenever I'm at a restaurant eating with a bunch of 50, 60, 70-year-old dentists, and we start talking about the next generation of millennials, we're blown away at what their lifestyles. I mean, they take cruises in dental. They talk about their student loan debt, but that included a Honda Accord and a cruise and trips. They flew in airplanes on vacation. This is all shit that none of us did until we had children. My car, I got more money than any dental student, obviously, and my car is a 2004 with 140,000 miles on it. When I get in for oil change, I was like, "Well, why change oil? Just leave it here and I'll give you a brand new one." I'm like, "Why? I'm 3 miles from work." I mean, worst case scenario, breaks down exactly halfway, and I have to walk 1.5 miles, either front or back, and I'd probably call Uber. And but the bottom line is that that is, I love it. I've never heard that. He makes it and she saves it, because what I see, and also I'm in practice management, I'm in consulting, Dentaltown, so I'm sure I get the outlier people all bitching, moaning, and complaining, and I'm sure the happy ones are not reaching out, but it's just the spending is crazy. I mean, like $5,000 Gucci purses. Do you know how many fillings you have to do and pay your overhead and pay taxes to buy a $5,000 Gucci purse?
And I think that practice ownership actually educates you on these kind of principles.
Yeah.
And like when you're just an employee and you just get, I actually read this book that I forgot the author's name. It's called Black Swan, but it's basically about how the monthly paycheck is one of the worst things that's ever happened. And the reason is because you rely on it, you think your standard of income or your standard of living should be at the level that your monthly paycheck is. And in fact, it's far lower. And because you don't think in those terms, because you're not running a business and doing the finances on a constant basis, you don't actually know where you stand from a financial perspective. So I think financial literacy
and other little things that blow my mind, like, when we were little, coffee was free at a gas station, and you just poured it in a little white styrofoam cup, and it was some blackish tar mixture of hot or cold or whatever. And now they go to Starbucks and buy a $5 coffee. A $5 coffee every single day is almost $2,000 a year. And the running joke is, if you want to hide something from a millennial, you put it in their home oven, because they eat out every meal. And when you pay $5 for every cup of coffee and you eat out every meal, and then the other thing that they seem to do is, their cars. When you go to the 2 dental schools in my backyard, I mean, it's just a sea of these fancy new cars. And then I'm pulling up in something that's 13 years old, and you're like, what is wrong with this picture?
What happened?
And I think, Howard, the irony is that, when you're an associate, you think it's no big deal, like you're saying, to go buy a Gucci purse or spend $2,000 on a vacation or buy a brand new car with the X payment per month. But the second you start talking about buying a practice, they're like, what are you, crazy? I'm going to spend $1 million on a practice. I'm going to spend $500,000 on a practice. You're out of your mind. But the reality is that the bank is going to finance you at 100%. You're paying it off over the next 10 to 15 years. Eventually, it's going to be all paid off, and every cent of that is yours.
And the Gucci purse doesn't generate any money.
But it is nice.
It is pretty. But, but at the end of the day, you have an income-generating asset and you have a material asset that doesn't do anything. Or worse, a car that's a depreciating asset.
And going back to the soccer mom, I raised 4 boys, Eric, Greg, Ryan, and Zach, and it was the single best decision I ever made. I mean, now that I'm 54, and my oldest one made me, I have 2 grandchildren now, Taylor and Gunnar, and grandchildren are simply your reward for not killing all 4 of your boys. And now I'm glad I never killed them all. And it is great. Oh, back to the soccer mom.
Soccer mom.
I call bullshit on I want to take a job at corporate to be a soccer mom, because having raised 4 boys, you know what a real soccer dad is? A soccer dad isn't, I get off at 5 and I don't have to worry about my business. A real soccer dad is your kid just fell down on the playground and he's bleeding and they're taking him to Chandler Regional Hospital, and I own the place, and I just walk out, tell my house manager, cancel the patients, have an associate. A real soccer mom is, I don't know if I'm going to stay home 6 weeks or 8 weeks or come back full-time or part-time. So I'm going to hire an associate, and I'm going to start her, I'm going to tell her, I'm going to guarantee her 6 weeks. But then in 6 weeks, I'm home thinking, I don't think I'm going to come back 5 days a week. I think I'm going to come back 3 days. I think I'm going to do Monday, Tuesday, take off Wednesday, then do Thursday, then have a 3-day week. A real soccer mom owns her own place so the kids can truly come first. Because when you work at corporate, they ain't thinking about your kids first. They're thinking about you're in there, you're doing, and asking for time off. And then they say, you can't have that week time off, but it's your boys are going to wrestling camp and Flagstaff, and you want to go up there. So I think to be the ultimate soccer mom, you gotta be self-employed.
Totally, or being penalized by your work culture because you have to leave early, or you want to go to your kids' recital or whatever is going on in your family, and you're prioritizing that. And they think, I think that in corporate, it's really tough because the structure seems to be 9 to 5, put in your hours, go home, come back the next day, put in your hours again. And, people are productive at all different times. So having that rigidity, I think, is a disservice, and especially difficult for, creating a family and having a full life. And that's part of the thing that really is attractive about ownership. If we decide that we want to take a week off and go on vacation, I'll really book the 3 weeks prior to that and make sure that I'm super busy, and then I don't even worry about the week we're off. And I don't have to answer anything. I have colleagues who will fill in for me. You decide exactly how you want to structure your life.
I'm glad you brought that up, actually, because in our blog, we talk about that all the time. We constantly ask people, how much control do you want to have in your life? And I think it's like a switch you make from an employee to an owner or to a business owner, because you really start thinking totally differently. And when you can start calling the shots, and even small things like going to see a soccer game or something like that, it really changes the way you live your life. And that's kind of why we did all of it.
Yeah, that is one of the favorite pieces of research I ever read. The largest employer of economists in the world is the Federal Reserve, and they have some of the most amazing research. I mean, I think they have 3,500 PhD economists that work for the Fed. They have 12 different locations spread out, and they were trying to look at someone said to them, do companies that offer bonuses system make better results? So they really exhaustively looked into that, and they found out that it actually is a horrible thing, because you have this very well-rounded holistic business, but when you just start giving a bonus for this one thing, everybody loses their peripheral vision and they chase after this one thing, and it usually harms the business. And they said, well, who is growing the most? Who is the most profitable? And what is management doing with those employees? And it was overwhelmingly the employees who had the longest leash. If you said, well, you got to work 8 to 5, and she's thinking, damn it, if you just would have said 8:15, I could have taken my daughter and dropped her off at school every day. And every day she's coming in pissed that she couldn't drop off her daughter at school because this asshole boss says she has to be there at 8, and he's not even there. And so when you look at companies who say, like in the Dentaltown magazine, I tell them just do your work. Some come at 6 in the morning and leave at 3. Some come at 9 and leave at 7. At least everyone works from home at least one day a week. Some full time. I think I got 5 employees who never even come in, but they do their work. But when you give them a long leash, and they have more control over, and I tell it the same thing in the dental office. I mean, if let them have more control. A lot of dentists will sit there and say their employees can't take personal phone calls during the day. Well, dude, she's got 2 kids, and one of them had a fever, and you're back there talking to Muffy 4 times a day, who's probably drinking a martini and drunk, and she can't talk to her kid's teacher. She can't take it, So if you're going to talk to your kids at work, then you let your employees. But the longer the leash, the happier they are. And I think corporate dentistry, again, I keep saying over and over that the final model for an associate has not been discovered yet. And the only people that are keeping employees a really long time that are professionals, like lawyers or consultants, they make them partner. And I think one of the biggest problems with corporate is when they realize I will be an employee my whole life, and I will always be having to ask permission from an office manager or some regional manager, and they see no pathway to partnership, to owner. A law firm, you'll sweat blood 70 hours a week for 3 years because you think, well, I'll do that and I'll make partner. And then what do you feel when you partner? Well, I can relax. I'm an owner here. I'm a partner. So if I want to leave at 3 o'clock, go pick up my kid, I can because I'm a partner, But hey, thank you so much for all you do. I mean, I just want to try to provide great information to my homies so that he can live faster, easier, stay happy and healthy. And they're scared. They stay in there too long. I don't know why they get a job for a year to pick up speed. Again, I graduated May 11th, 30 years ago this month. This is May 19th. May 11th, 30 years ago, I graduated from UMKC Dental School. And I had mine open September 21st. And I know that the only reason I could do that is because I watched my dad open up 9 different Sonic drive-in restaurants. So I went through it 9 times, the demographics, the location, the hiring staff. And that's another reason why it's so much better to buy a practice, because you eliminate all those variables. Will it be successful? Will I be able to hire a right team? I mean, you already got a business. You already got the team. And a 25-year-old punk can't teach a team that's already been in there doing it for 10 years. I mean, I remember when I opened up my own practice, I did reverse discrimination. I figured I was 24, so on every category, I hired the oldest person. I mean, I wasn't going to hire a 22-year-old hygienist. Hell, I was 24. That'd be Dumb and Dumber. Neither of us would know what it is. So I had like 9 hygienists apply, and one was like 54, and I just told her, I said, I'll hire you if you just tell me what to do. And same thing at the front. I hired a bunch of old ladies, and they showed me what to do. So when you buy a practice, you've already got the management, you already got the team, you've eliminated so much risk. And then if you're a girl and your husband's got a job and you only need about $150 a year, then you can buy a practice for $650. But if you're LDS and you already had 2 kids in dental school and you need $300,000, then you're not going to buy a $650,000 practice. You're going to buy a $2 million practice, because you need 3 times the income, so you can buy that right out of the gate. I mean, so I need to know, what do you need? If you got a stay-home wife with 2 kids walking, 1 in the oven, and 3 probably coming out someday, you want to buy a big beast. But if your expectations are, I only want to work 3-4 days a week. My husband's got a good job. We're not going to have any kids. We're only going to have cats. That way, if we get hungry, we can always eat them. Then you could buy, a small practice. But I just love what you're doing, and I just want to know, let you know I'll do anything to help you, because the kids need to hear from you. And thank you for all that you're doing for dentistry.
Well, thank you. We're so excited and honored to be on the podcast, and we wanted to make an offer to everybody who listens. Because Dentaltown provided so much for us, and so we wanted to give back to the listeners. So we have a coupon for a discount.
Yeah, it's 15% off, and if you just put in Farron15 in the coupon code thing when you purchase the course, any of the bundles, you'll get 15% off.
So Ferran 15.
Yep.
And why did you go Ferran? Why not like Fabio or I think it looked more like Fabio than Ferran. What do you think, Ryan? So on the discount that's on the website?
So once you sign up and you come to the sales page, which takes like about a week or two, when you get to the sales page, if you're interested in buying the course, you'll get 15% off.
All right, and have you started a thread about this on Dentaltown?
No, but we will.
We'll do that.
But
Okay.
I do think you should write an article in the new patient grad edition, and you should write one in Dentaltown. I think that'd be great stuff. But again, thank you for all that you do for dentistry.